I live by two core principles, right? The first is that everything everyone knows, they learned. And I don't accept that I'm less intelligent than the next person, which means I can learn it too, right? The second is that every single excuse I have is valid, but that's still not going to give me the results that I want. And so we do live in this really PC culture today, where people are looking for the excuse. And the truth is, the excuse is completely valid. Yes, you are a young black person growing up in democratic South Africa for the past 26 years, but for hundreds of years before that, it wasn't built for you to succeed, right? Yes, you're living in one of the most difficult credit capital markets in the world, so it's hard to get access to funding to start a business. Yeah, all of that stuff's true, but that's still not going to change your circumstance. So the test is not whether or not you know the reasons for not succeeding. The test is whether or not you're willing to do whatever it takes to get to that next level. And a big part of the whatever it takes actually is just remain teachable. Just be a student of the game, a student of life, a student of those who've achieved. And I've found that those two things have really stood me in good stead. So first, just to make the admission that I do get pissed, and I'm very real and raw at that emotion, right? So I recognize the imbalance that the world we live in has, but I also recognize that those imbalances are man-made, Tom. And they were created by people who precede us, who had a particular view of the world. And my role is to shift people's views and perspective, right? So that's literally what I do when I'm on a platform. I'm just there to help you see the world differently than how you've seen it before. That's it. Yeah, so the first one is your excuses are valid. The second one is your reality is your reality. So you're not imagining it. You're not imagining that you're poor. You're not imagining that you're left out because you live in a third world country. You're not imagining that you're not getting the right quality of education to make you globally competitive. You're not imagining that. That shit's real, right? Okay, but now that you've got it, you can live in the emotion, and sometimes I do. I get really, really mad and really, really upset. But then the following morning comes and you realize that you've moved not an inch of distance, yet you've expanded all of this time and this emotion. I mean, right now, if you think about the world we live in, just think about how much hatred there is. Think about how much anger there is. And yet we're not moving. So what really pulls me out of it, and it's an honest conversation with me, is I go, do you want the emotion or do you want progress? Because you can't have both. I'll give you an example. You're at the gym, right? You're curling. You're rep 8. And your body starts to fire off those signals in your brain and it goes, stop, it hurts. If you stop, you get the emotion, you don't get the progress. So if you talk to any decent athlete, they'll tell you that where the pain starts is when the work starts, right? Talk to any decent entrepreneur that's built a large scale business, they'll tell you the shit they had to go through. So you either get the emotion or you get the progress, but you can't have both. Right? We're living in this world today where everybody is just so deeply embedded in the emotion. I want to be angry at Tom because he's X, Y, and Z, and I want to be angry at Vusi because, yeah, yet you make no progress. So yours and my challenge, I think, as a generation is how do we give the world progress? And finally, you asked me, so the question around, so how do you get over that, right? So here's the final bit, is I recognize that my generation has it the easiest. Like, I think we forget, actually, that our generation probably has it the easiest in the history of Homo sapiens on this little rock called planet Earth. In my generation's Tom, if I say something that's politically incorrect, I might trend on Twitter. If my grandfather said something politically incorrect, he would have been killed or landed up in jail. So sometimes we've lost a sense of perspective, right? Around it's not easy, but damn, it's much easier than it's ever been. And you have a responsibility to own your progress. You can either own the emotion or progress, but you don't get both. The hardest thing to do is to enable people to see themselves as they are. Not as they hoped they were, not as they've been taught they are, but as they actually are. It's the single hardest thing to do, and I'll tell you why. Because we're all embedded in this construct of a thing called identity, right? And what people forget is identity by its very nature, one is man-made and two is exclusive. What that means is the minute I say I'm male, it means I'm not female. If I say I'm black, it means I'm not white. If I say I'm African, it means I'm not American. If I say I am, educated, it means I'm not illiterate. So all the little words we use to construct identity put us in a box. They don't free us, right? And it's something people, I think, don't think about, because people today have assumed an identity for who they are. And it's all over, right? It's in the media, it's on social media, it's on TV, it's in the newspapers, it's in music videos. All you're being sold is an identity. This is what you should be based on where you come from and based on how you've been socialized. Very early on, my father taught me that I didn't have to be what society told me, right? That I could be different. I'm short, therefore I can't model. Okay? I mean, it's not established that short people should model, but whether you should or whether you can are very different tests, right? And by the way, I approach every little thing in my life like that. Like all the shit I do, I go, I shouldn't, but it doesn't mean I can't. There's a big fucking difference. So if you're telling me I shouldn't be in the room, you may be correct. It doesn't mean I don't have the capacity to be in the room. I want to force my way in, and I'm going to get to change your mind. So this thing about identity, I think, is so powerful, because in today's world where we're no longer demographics, we're a psychographic now. There is a kid living in Kuala Lumpur who's never been out of Kuala Lumpur, who sounds like a kid in Brooklyn, New York, because he's watching Jay-Z on YouTube. But he's completely immersed in that culture, and he's never left his small little village, right? And that's exactly the point, is everything you've been taught you are, somebody taught you that's what you are. Now, you can keep that identity, but again, you can't get the progress. And so what a lot of people do is they hang on to it, right? In South Africa, it's often about gender. Sometimes it's about tribe, right? So what tribe you come from. There's a big generation issue. So it's, I'm part of this generation. Yeah, all those things are true. But do you want the identity or do you want the progress? Because you can't have both. I'll tell you just quickly a story. So my dad was the sensei in the dojo, right? And I used to train with my dad in the dojo. And so I asked him one time, I was like, how come we get to change belts? Like, I mean, couldn't you teach the methodology without the belt system? He said two things. He said, first, human beings are incentive-based, so you need something to aim for. But he said the second thing is the reason we give you a belt is because it assigns an identity. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're orange belt, you can't take on a brown belt. It's just you embed that in your mind and you go, well, he's senior, then therefore. And so one of the things he said to me, one of the things you're going to have to learn is that real life doesn't have a belt system. So everything we know and have learned about identity is given to us. It's a template that somebody has given you, and you can just choose to run that script of Macross or not. So I think the language is important here. I'm not saying black people don't deserve freedom. I think that's an important point to make. First of all, freedom isn't something you deserve. It's a God-given right. It's like breathing, right? So you shouldn't have to justify why you deserve to be free. And often people that approach that conversation heard me to say, black people don't deserve freedom. And I'm going, no. The idea that you deserve it means there's something you have to do to earn it, which by itself is fallacious. There is nothing you have to do to earn the right, as Tom Bill, you to self-determine. You get to self-determine. That's your human right, right? That said, if you accept, and we all do, that there have been hundreds of years of structural exclusion and oppression, not only of the black body, but of the black mind, most importantly, the black mind. Nelson Mandela sitting on the plane going, holy shit, there's a black pilot, right? This is the father of our democracy, himself being caught in that trap. But he had to be wise enough and smart enough to step out of that comment in his head and see that comment in the context of the moment. So when I'm saying we weren't ready for freedom, what I mean is we got it, but we haven't freed our minds, right? So what we're doing is we're defaulting to the reasons and excuses we had pre-freedom for why we're not doing the shit we should be doing in freedom now. So the oldest, most independent country in Africa, I think, is Ghana. And it's probably been independent for over 60 years, right? But if you track the trajectory of where that country has gone, If you go to Haiti, and of course there are several structural issues around the relationship Haiti has with Europe and with France. But if you go to Haiti, and if you go to Zimbabwe, just north of here, so who's Zimbabwe going to blame? That's really a question, because what happens is we've put these people in positions of power and leadership whose mindset was not disentangled from the way things used to be. So they bring an oppressed mind into a freedom construct. Then they act like oppressed people, and we wonder why the results are the way they are. KRS-One said it the most beautiful way. In one of his raps, he said, as Black people, we need to be free people, not freed people.
Shit.
And the point there is, the point of departure is when you're free, you don't find the need to explain your freedom. You just are, right? And so that's where that comment was coming from, and it was a reflection. It was, okay, so we got it. But were we ready for it? Are we using it to the best of its ability, this incredible freedom that we enjoy? Are we really being transformative? Are we being imaginative? Are we doing new, great, and powerful things? Are we being a generation that our children's children will look at and go, those guys had the right template, they got it right? Or not? And it's a question we have to answer every single day. 100%, which is why I think the work of our generation today really is around forcing us to reconstruct these very identities we have. If you think about it, we live in a world today where almost all identities are assumed, right? So the idea, for instance, of masculinity is assumed, all right? The idea of being a strong Zulu man is assumed. There is a script, there's a book somebody wrote that says, these are the ways you've got to be this thing, right? And I didn't get to do the edit. I just got the PDF version, right? But I'm saying, if I'm living in a world that is complex and changing, I can't take this PDF script into a new environment. It ain't going to work. So I either get to keep the tradition and the emotion, or I get progress, but I can't do both, right? And, for me, I really used to resent this because I would get chastised, I'd get mocked, I would get attacked. And then I realized that actually I was giving others the permission to be themselves too, right? So, and that's the most empowering thing that you can do when you choose to step into no man's land.
Meaning saying the things that you're saying? The sort of inflammatory things?
Well, so not only saying the things that you're saying, but allowing yourself to be ventilated, allowing those thoughts to be discussed and ventilated by people, right? One of the things I had to learn was, as I did it, it was incredible how many other people came out and said, "Phew, glad you said it, because I've been thinking it, but I couldn't say it because they'd lynch me." I was like, wow, man. So we're all aware that the script doesn't work, but none of us are willing to say it because they're going to throw us in the proverbial social media concentration camp. Well, that doesn't sound right. I mean, that's not progress, right? Final thing, just for you to think about, which is this: what's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is you're wrong. Then you're educated, which goes back to where we started at the very beginning, right? Remain teachable. So the worst thing that can happen is you say something, you're wrong, somebody picks up the phone, you're educated, you grow up, and you mature. But I think it's really important. I think this idea of identity is just so powerful. When somebody asks the question, who are you? How do you answer that question, right? Are you the job you have? Are you the place you come from? Are you the lineage of your ancestors? Are you the qualifications? Are you your geography? Who are you, right? And I think a lot of us don't really bother to give that enough thought.